Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you see that the situation in Ferguson, Missouri is showing no sign of really letting up. It's also leading to a lot of conversations about race, about police brutality, about police misconduct, just so many other things. And one person that I get a chance to speak with on a regular basis, and I respect him a lot. I've known him. I didn't know him when he was at Syracuse University, where I used to teach, but I met him afterward, and I've gained so much respect for him. Is former NBA player Etan Thomas, who is now the author of the book Fatherhood: The Ultimate Challenge. He has also made quite a name for himself as an advocate for issues that relate to people of color, as well as many other things. So I want to ask you, Tom, how you doing today, brother?
I'm pretty good. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well, man, really well. Now, you and I had a heated conversation on your radio show.
Right.
And what's the name of your show again? I want to make
The
sure.
collision where sports and politics collide.
The Collision. I love that title.
Right.
And so we were kind of, kind of going back and forth a little bit about the Ferguson thing. We were on the same page, but maybe just taking different paths to get there.
Right.
So let me ask you this, based on where things are right now with Ferguson, what are your initial thoughts about, where we are, where we need to go, all that stuff?
Oh wow, there's so much I don't know where to begin. The way that the media was depicting everything is really disheartening. The media has a way of crafting and having you think that the person who is the victim is actually the person who is wrong, and the shifting the attention away from actually what happened to the reaction. We're dealing with the symptoms of the problem, not the root of the problem. And that's something that's really disheartening. But what we're talking about on the show, and we could definitely continue talking about it, is the relationship between, which is a bigger issue, relationship between the police and the black community. And I think this is something that we definitely have to examine, because it's not a new problem, it's not a new issue. I don't really see why the people of Ferguson should have any confidence right now in the police. The way that they've handled everything, and the fact that Darren Wilson is really in hiding right now. Nobody's heard from him. His Facebook accounts, all his social media has been wiped away clean, and he's on paid vacation, administrative leave, or whatever they want to call it. But he's not arrested. So you have a situation where a young black man who's unarmed is gunned down in the middle of the street in broad daylight, left for 4 hours or however long. Looks like it's an execution. I mean, he's shot in the top of his head, the side of his head, and his arms and his hands. That why everybody is doing the don't shoot, because it looks like this is the only way that you can be shot in the palm of your hand. And there's no credibility. There's no accountability for it. He's just on administrative leave. And the way that the police in Missouri have handled this, I don't think that could have been any worse. So it's really they're not doing anything to really help the relationship, the strained relationship of the police and the black community there. But you had a different take. You want to look at it from a different way. So let's continue that conversation. And which way should we look at it to try to maybe not put all the policemen in the same bucket? I think that was pretty much what your point was.
Yeah, well, I would say that it is it's not to our benefit to vilify all individual cops, as if they are unredeemable human beings that are seeking to use their weapons at every available opportunity. I think if you were to listen to a candid conversation amongst police officers, what you would find is that most of them, from my experience, don't want to use their weapon, because things like this happen. You get backlash. You can go to prison. Bad things can occur, even if you're trying to do the right thing. But what you might also find is an accustomed abuse of authority that might occur, right? Where officers really believe, similar to what the guy wrote in the op-ed, where he said, "If you don't want to get hurt, then do what I say." Yeah, I'm sure you saw that op-ed. That was
Yeah, of course.
right. And so I think that is the core issue. It's talking about how are they trained, right? Why are they being trained to be like soldiers, to somehow believe that their authority is always preeminent in every situation? Why is it that they believe that they can commit crimes against citizens and get away with it? And I think that is a persistent problem. But I think that when you get to this point where you've got people that, I mean, I've literally heard people say that they don't care when a cop gets shot. It's no, they deserve it. And I just don't think that that's productive, because I think that we need good police officers. Most of us, when we are in a serious situation, we want to have an officer nearby. We would be unhappy if the police said, "We're not going to protect you. You're on your own." Like look at when you talk about Detroit, where the where the police chief said, "Arm yourselves because we can't help you." I don't think that's not the world I want to live in. So how do you draw that balance between the two?
I think where it becomes difficult is that, especially in the black community, and I could look at myself when I was growing up, is hard to feel that the police really are there to protect and serve you. You know what I mean? They're looking at you like you're the enemy. So you feel the hatred kind of radiating from their eyes when they drive past you. I remember, growing up, and I was young, we're from middle school to high school, and we'd be outside and the police roll by and everybody just stops and looks at them. And they're staring at us, and they're staring at us not like, we're here to help you. They're staring at us, with eyes of anger and hate. And it's a feeling that you get that many people, especially young black teenagers right now, young black men or whatever, can really relate to. So if we're not doing anything to kind of salvage that type of relationship, and right now the way that they're handling this particular case is not making the situation any better. But you can't blame the people's reaction to finally being fed up with it. Their reaction isn't to one incident. It's to a series of incidents, to a culture of abuse by authorities, and to where a community is finally fed up. And I'm not justifying anybody breaking the law or anything like that, but we have to look at the root of the problem. And we also have to really realize how things are being reported. The overwhelmingly majority of people down there are not committing crimes and not, breaking bottles and throwing things and breaking and looting and things like that. There's a small minority that is actually doing that. But the way that the police is actually handling everything, and it's amazing because, Don Lemon, and I disagree with a whole lot of what he says, but what he was saying was that he was so surprised that he got pushed. He's like, I got pushed, and I heard one of the police officers said to a colleague, he said the N-word. I was like, really, Don? Really? You got pushed? Really? You know what I mean? We're talking about Mike Brown, who was shot 6 times and you got pushed, and that's your wake-up call? So if you can imagine what they're doing right now, when they know that the whole world is watching them, when they know that all eyes are on them, there's video cameras everywhere right now on Ferguson, and the way that they're behaving, imagine what the people of the community have to deal with day in and day out when the cameras aren't rolling. So, it's a little bit tough to really say, look on the bright side of how they're dealing with everything, especially surrounding the officer who murdered Mike Brown.
Well, I agree with you. I don't think there's a lot of bright side when you look at the Ferguson Police Department. I mean, you certainly see a lot of problematic behavior. You see that they have a history and a pattern of abuse. You see that they have a lack of diversity. You see that they racially profile consistently in that community. So I agree with you. I think that the way they've handled all of this has really served to put gasoline on top of the fire, right?
Right.
And it's interesting too. When you talk about, when you made the point about how they're behaving with the world watching, I think that there is a soldier mentality sometimes that says that we don't answer to the public. We're going to go out of our way to show you that law and order prevails over public perception. So for example, I remember when we went to Missouri about 5 years ago, toward the end of '09, and we were protesting in this little podunk town. I mean, just a scary little racist town for Heather Ellis, the woman that was going to go to prison for 15 years for cutting in line at a Walmart and got into an altercation with police. And I remember, it seemed that police and prosecutors actually clamped down even more because they knew that the public was watching what happened. The same thing happened when with Sharpton and I went to Ohio to support Kelly Williams Bolar, who was going to be sent to jail for sending her child to the wrong school. The police and prosecutors were worse on them because they knew people were watching. Because the thing is that, and this is something that's interesting too, and I'm going to get your take on this, there's always a backdrop. You've got the vocal protests. You've got the people that are on TV. People see millions of people that are supporting Michael Brown, but there's also this other crowd that is standing on the other side saying, no, we support the officer.
Hmm.
We believe that Michael Brown was a bad person or whatever, and you wonder, are they responding to some of that as well? So I guess so I guess my question on this that I twisted into is, um, what do you say, when you see those people on that other side that are saying, you know, we don't know all the facts. There are people that say that Michael Brown charged at the officer, that the officer's life was in danger. He doesn't have a record of doing anything like this in the past. What is the response to that?
I think the response is his record has nothing to do with anything. They have to look at the facts, and what the facts are is that he killed him and shot him 6 times. Those are the facts. So what happens after what happened with Trayvon Martin, what happened with Jordan Davis, the person who was killed is now put on trial. So then his past is brought up. Then they brought up that he got in trouble when he was in middle school. Then he, got suspended one time for chewing gum in the classroom or something like that. And they bring up anything bad that they could possibly bring up against him to try to demonize him. But they don't do that with the policeman. The policeman, everything is so protected, and everything is wiped away, and he's taken away as if like an angry mob is going to come and try to get him. Which there's been no record of anybody doing that. You know what I mean? Been no record of once a policeman identity is revealed that an angry mob comes in and is knocking at his door like with the pitchforks, like the way they used to do us back in the day. There's no record of that. But the way that they are put on trial and just the demonizing, but then it's not so much just Michael Brown that is demonized. It's all young black men, the entire culture. Then you have ignorant statements like it's the hoodie. Like, no, it's not the hoodie, Geraldo Rivera. No, that's not what happened. That wasn't the issue. It was what was under the hoodie. So whether Trayvon Martin had a hoodie or a cowboy hat or a baseball hat, or whether he had locks or a bald head or waves or a flat top or a Gumby or S curl, it was what was underneath, which was the threat. And that's why people are being so critical.
Did you say Gumby and S curl?
Whatever he had, because they're trying to blame all these different things. Then they blame the clothes. Well, he had baggy pants. Well, now the style is to wear skinny jeans. Well, now he has skinny jeans. Like, okay, it's not the clothes. It's not the hair. You're afraid of the black face. Just say that. You know what I mean? And that's the part where our young people, and that's why people were so critical of President Obama in his first statement. And I was too. And I'm a surrogate for President Obama. You know what I mean? I've supported him for both elections. I'm an official surrogate. And after his first statement, I was disappointed. I said, wait a minute. Now, you didn't address anything that you needed to address in this first statement. And the second statement was a little bit better. And in the third statement, he addressed some of the different bigger issues, which he said, okay, we don't need police brutality, excessive force, which everybody had just been watching on a 24 hours news reel on every news channel. He condemned the people who were breaking the law. Then he said that, he spoke to young black men. He used the term men of color, but he said young, which was, code for young black men that are being looked at as a threat. So what he was trying to change through My Brother's Keeper and things like that. And he assured everybody that he's doing everything that he possibly can to remedy the situation. And he said he understood everybody's frustration. That's what he needed to say the first time. You know what I mean? And I'll give criticism where criticism is due and credit where credit is due. The first statement was horrible. That's a statement that Bush could have made. And the third statement I was much more pleased with, and then him sending Eric Holder and doing the things, those are the things that people need to see. But it's interesting, and I want to throw a question back at you right now. We talk about the leadership and the people who you see on TV you mentioned, and the people who you see, right now there's a big thing about the crowd and the reaction of people not really wanting Reverend Jesse Jackson and Reverend Sharpton there. And it's interesting. I posted on Facebook just what do people think of Reverend Jesse Jackson, and the comments were pretty harsh. I don't know, you work a lot with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I worked a lot with Reverend Sharpton as well. So I see some of the good that they've done, but they've been criticized. So is it time for a new type of leadership? What is the focus? Do we need a leader? Do we need one leader to lead the masses of people, or what is it going to take to turn, like Roland Martin says, to turn this situation, this incident, into an actual movement?
Well, I think we certainly need more leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need different leadership? Yeah, I personally think that I think Sharpton and Jackson can play a role. From the time that I've spent around each of them, I get the impression that they deeply care about black people, and that they have made so many sacrifices that people don't even know about. I still remember I don't think she'll mind me sharing the story. I remember Jesse's daughter telling me a story about how they used to have to use I think that she said they took the door off. They had to take the door off the hinges and use it as a kitchen table because they didn't have any money to buy a kitchen table or something like that, you know. And so they've gone through some struggles. She mentioned her father being on the list in the 1970s, being on the list of leaders most likely to be assassinated, right behind the president and the Pope. He was number 3 out of 10, and so there's just this struggle, this trauma that they've experienced and overcome. I don't think most people understand how hard it is for a 72-year-old man to get up and get on an airplane every other day and to constantly be available when his community calls. I wish people would listen to Reverend Jackson's radio show, Keep Hope Alive Radio, and notice that even when people were all so hyped up with the Obama administration that they forgot about caring about poor black people, he was consistently speaking on behalf of poor black people. His message never changed. It was always very consistent. And you can't ignore that. Now, I think that you can say, okay, maybe we need to enhance our leadership. Maybe we need to add some new pieces in the wheel. Maybe sometimes you need to step to the side a little bit to create space for these other people. You know, and that's a legitimate critique. But I think to somehow when you come up to me and you act like Jesse Jackson ain't never did nothing for you, that he ain't did nothing but sold you out and he's worthless, that makes me want to smack you because you're clearly uneducated. You clearly have not read the 45-year history of this man's consistent action for black. In fact, most of the black people protesting in Ferguson now wouldn't have the rights that they have right now to do what they do if it wasn't for Jesse Jackson. Let's be clear. He cleared those paths. There would be no Barack Obama if there were not a Jesse Jackson in that first presidential campaign in the 1980s. So, or 2 campaigns. So I would just say that, you know, we can make room for the new, but still respect the old. You cannot get to the point where you just want to throw our elders out the window as if they've done nothing, because that's just pathetic.
And I would say the same thing with Reverend Sharpton. You know, a lot of the cases, especially with dealing with the NYPD and the corruption of the NYPD, like he's been the first one there attacking it, and you wouldn't have even known of many cases if it weren't for him. A lot of the things, I mean, especially, you know, I was born in New York. I had many conversations with my grandfather about the things that would go on and the corruption about the NYPD and what they do and everything like that and what they get away with. And people got to really understand that he's putting himself on the line all the time, right there, confronting that. So, I mean, you know, they're not perfect. Either one of them are not perfect, and either one of them have flaws. I think that one thing that would definitely help, like you said, is that they would move to push more younger people to have a more collective movement. I mean, there's such a strong disconnect right now between the older generation and the younger generation. And there was before in the 60s as well. You know, everybody wants to act like they loved Dr. King back in the 60s, but they didn't. You know what I mean? All the black churches and stuff like that, they shunned him. And he was really pushing more with the young people. But, you know, it's that same disconnect that's going on right now. But here's my question to you. What do we tell our young people? And this is the thing that's really the crucial part of this entire thing. What do we learn from this? Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know, our young people have to know that the chips are stacked against them. They're not going to be treated the way the other kids are treated when they do something wrong. So if they do a snatch and grab, even if he did snatch the little $40 worth of cigars, okay, that's not a reason to die. That's not a reason to be shot 6 times. You know what I mean? You're not going to be treated the same way. So you have to know that already going in. You saw the situation that happened with Ray Allen, where the kids broke into his house. As soon as they said that it was a prank, I automatically knew what color the kids were. I didn't even have to look at the story. I knew they were little white kids. You know what I mean? Because if it had been black kids, they wouldn't have said that it was a harmless prank. They would have said possible gang ties. You know what I mean? We had to come in there, guns blazing, things like that. It would have been completely different. So young people have to know that that is the situation that they're dealing with. And then it has to transfer into everything that we've been talking about as far as the way that our young people are educated. You know what I mean? The school to prison pipeline, the setup, the holes that they've dug for us to fall into. And young people have to know that they can't fall into these holes, because there's going to be a whole lot more officers that they're going to come in contact with who are like Darren Wilson. This is not an anomaly. So the world is not set up to be fair, but young people have to figure out a way to navigate around it. I think that's the message that we have to really tell them and let them know. Listen, you have no time for foolishness. We have to be 3 times as good. You got to work 3 times as hard, not twice, but 3 times as hard. You know what I mean? And that's what we have to really be able to understand from this.
Well, I agree with you, and I think working three times as hard as the competition is just a good policy to have in general. That's what helps the Jewish community do so well. That's what helps, those Asians, those parts of the Asian community that are doing well. I think that just that as a general philosophy for life can make you successful no matter who you are. And I think you're right about the fact that we can't lie to kids about racism. That's one of the big problems that we've had recently, is that we've had people promoting things like a post-racial society and making people believe that, well, look, you got a black president, so racism isn't real. And I think that it's funny, while at the same time, while we now have so many people that are criticizing the presence of people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, I think we're also having a heightened realization and a heightened understanding of the necessity of individuals like that, because no matter how much we want to critique their presence on the ground, we have to realize that that they are able to provide attention and a spotlight on issues, as you mentioned, that would not be provided otherwise. There's really nobody else out there besides Jackson, Farrakhan, and Sharpton that can really draw that kind of attention on a racial issue the way they can. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, and we also have to recognize the difference between constructive criticism and people who are going to, hate you no matter what you do, which are the people on Fox News. So when Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh and all of them want to criticize President Obama, or they want to criticize, Reverend Jackson or Reverend Sharpton or something like that, it's with a totally different tone, a totally different ulterior motive. You know what I mean? So we can be critical of our president. We can be critical of Reverend Sharpton. We can be critical of Jesse Jackson. You know what I mean? But we're all on the same page trying to get to the same goal. So we have to really understand that difference. I don't want us to think that we can't be critical of anybody. Everybody deserves some type of criticism. Nobody's perfect. You know what I mean? At all. Nobody's name who's not Jesus Christ. There's nobody else that's perfect. So we have to make sure that we understand that we have to hold each other accountable. And it's okay to criticize President Obama. You don't have to turn it to Tavis Smiley. You don't have to turn it to Rush Limbaugh. You know what I mean? You can be critical of him and still push him to do better. He wants that from us. He wants us to be critical of him. And that's really what we need to do.
Well, there you go. Well, I'll tell you, that's one thing I think is so great about your position, is that you, as you mentioned, you were a surrogate for Obama, a very strong supporter of the president. You've met the president. I can't say I've met the president. I live on the same. Well, I live near the president. I can't tell everybody where I live at, and I've never met him. I know about 50 people who know him, but I never met him. But you've been right there in that space. You're part of that inner circle because you are a far more likable person than most people are. I'm not that likable. Either you love me or you hate me. You have a presence where most people I've seen, it's like you ask them about Etan Thomas, they say, oh, he's a good dude. Even if they don't agree with you, and I think that is. I think that's a gift, and I think that's an opportunity, and I think that's an admirable quality that works for you. And so I like the fact that you have been able to be honest about your position on Obama, while at the same time still being seen as someone who is supportive of the president and wants to see him do well. And I would consider myself in the same position. I endorsed Obama before any. I mean, when black people were not voting for Barack, I went ahead and I went on CNN. It's on YouTube. People can find it. I said, I think this guy can be president. I really believe that his endorsement from Oprah is going to do it. I think Hillary Clinton's shaking in her boots. Things are going to change. And I was happy about that, right? But later on, when I came with the criticism, people were like, why do you hate the president? Why do you want to attack him? I'm like, no, this is just politics. This is what you're supposed to do. Like with your child, you're supposed to push your child to be better. When you talk to your son Malcolm, everything you say to him is not always going to be, oh, well, that was perfect, son. No, you're going to say, that was great. You're a great child. You're great. You're going to be a great man. Here's some areas where you can improve. Right? It's critiquing out of love, not in the Sean Hannity sense, right? Where it's just this ugly stuff. And the last point I'll make on that, and then I'll let you get the last word, is when you talk. Let's talk specifically. Let's move away from Obama. You talk about black leadership. I don't consider Obama to be a black leader. Neither does he. I think he is a leader who happens to be black, but he's the president first. And I agree with people when they say he's the president of the United States first. But black people are part of that. We are an important part of that constituency, and therefore we deserve respect and support as well. But we talk about specific black leaders, individuals whose primary objective and purpose is to serve the black community and the black community almost exclusively. I will say this. It is not easy to be a black leader. And I'll say this because if you think about this, think about can you most of us cannot name a single prominent black leader who's not dead, who is not seen, whose image has not been bastardized by the media, predominantly white media. You talk about Farrakhan, you got a lot of people say he's anti-Semitic, he's this, he's that, and the other. You talk about Sharpton, he's got a lot of criticism. Some of it legitimate now, but some of it is overstated. Or some of it reflects a lack of credibility. Like, who's this guy with the perm, or this when he was fat? Who's this fat guy with the perm, who, leading the black community? That shows how dumb black people are. Jesse Jackson, same thing. The only images that have been protected are Malcolm X and Martin Luther King because they're dead. If Malcolm and Martin were alive today, I truly believe that people would look at them in a similar light to the way they see Jesse and Al Sharpton, because the media would have distorted their images that bad. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's a good point, but then you have to ask, do we need one central leader? I mean, tell me this, who does the gay community have as their leader? You know what I mean? I don't know if they have an actual leader.
Ellen DeGeneres.
I don't know if we need just one leader to push us. We need a collective push effort, and we have to have some people where we have to connect some older generation and some younger generations who can have a collective voice. We don't need 15, 25 different leaders all, with their organizations and fighting against each other to do. We don't need that. Me personally, I don't think we need that. I think it becomes counterproductive. I think we need to start having different leaders combine and work together. That's what we need more of. And we need to be able to pull our young people in. Right now, you go to a lot of the organizations, there's all old people. Not old, but older people. Do you know what I mean? That's what it is. And then you have the young people that say, okay, you can be a part of us, but you just kind of have to just jump on board to what we're already doing. Well, young people don't want to hear that. Young people want to have their own movement. They have their own thoughts, the same way that they had in the 60s. You know what I mean? With SNCC and everything. So we have to be able to come together and know that we don't have to wait for this one leader to rise from the ashes and come up and lead us into the promised land. That's not what we need. We have a collective voice. We have power in numbers and unity. And that's what we need to be able to do to push forward.
Well, I'll tell you, one area where I think young people really are leading and having an influence is in the area of hip-hop. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the most prominent voices in hip-hop are not educated voices or enlightened voices, per se, at least in terms of the messages that are being promoted in mainstream media. And so, and I think this ties into Ferguson, because in Ferguson, you see, this is the first time that I can think of where there was a movement, a civil rights-ish situation where so many hip-hop artists were involved. And I think that they were connected because this incident occurred in the hood. There was just kind of a stronger presence of not just the black college students, but you're talking about the black kids who didn't go to college, right? And so that's when you start seeing the rappers get involved and stuff like that. And I really think that is where the greatest opportunity for young people to really surge to the front of the pack really lies, because they've got the biggest microphone. And you see that happening a little bit with Killer Mike. Killer Mike is nailing this down, I mean, just perfectly. You've seen him, he's writing op-eds. Him and T.I. both wrote op-eds. I mean, think about this. You got hip-hop artists, they didn't put out a song, a tribute song, or an album. They wrote an op-ed. They're going into our space, right? Which I think is amazing. And I think that what I would see is, or at least I hope, is that you'll see more and more of that, where they realize, look, the microphone's waiting for you right on the platform. Just stand up to it and say something that has substance, and don't just use it as a chance to promote Gucci and Cristal or whatever.
You saw a lot of different hip hop artists start to. Kweli, I just watched him on CNN, and he's somebody who you expect to be able to.
That was great though, the way he went ham and done. I love that.
You watch David Banner and you watch T.I., and I'm glad that Nelly went back down there and changed this tune, because at first he came out and he was criticizing the protesters. He was saying, okay, y'all jumping to conclusions, you need to wait to see everything play out, and everybody was like, wait to see everything plays out. Wait a minute, now they showed us how they're handling this, and that's why we're upset. But then he went back and to his community, because they need to hear the rappers and athletes have so much power. You know what I mean? And it has to be used for good. And I'm glad that Nelly, so I'm giving respect to Nelly for going back in there and standing with his people and supporting the people of Ferguson. So, much respect to him.
There you go. I agree. I think Nelly handled that well, but I mean that is a good point, that we have to give this guy a fair trial. Justice does not mean a guilty verdict necessarily. Justice does not mean that everything's going to play out the way we want it to play out. And I would say this if the races were reversed, you
Hmm.
know,
But
and
if the races were reversed, he would have been arrested already.
that's what we presume, right? We know that based on the track record, based on history, and that's obviously. I mean, those are things that that have occurred that we clearly have a reason to be upset about. But I think that two things have to be remembered. Number one, we still have to hear everything out in court. Even though we know if he were black, we know it would have played out different. But
Hmm.
still, he still has a right to his trial and to be heard because this man has his family, he has his rights. But also at the same time, we have to understand Ferguson is one city. This is one incident. This involves two people. This ain't got nothing to do with all the other Fergusons across America. I think that we can't get so caught up in making things right in Ferguson that we then walk away and say, "Oh, justice is served now because the
Oh.
Ferguson Police Department is better off."
And I
It's a
don't think people believe that. I think the problem of why everybody is so upset because it always happens. We're just getting off of everything for Trayvon Martin. We're just getting off everything for Jordan Davis. Eric Garner just got choked to death by the NYPD. So every other, I saw this great meme that was like, they had justice for, and it was a blank sign. So he's like, I'm just going to wait until the next person is murdered to put his name on here. And that's how often it is always happening. So this isn't just that it's an isolated incident. It's not. An officer just killed an unarmed man where I'm from in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it just happened. And these are things that happen all the time. We might be hearing about it a little bit more now, but the USA Today article that came out that said how often white police officers murder young black men. And it was amazing the number that they came out. I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but it's something that is shown that there's a much bigger problem that needs to be addressed. So having somebody on paid administrative leave is not going to solve anything. I mean, it's not going to solve anything for the New York mayor to say, okay, maybe we need some more intense training or sensitivity courses or things like that. That's not what's going to solve anything. What's going to solve it is when you have these officers that are convicted of doing this to actually be fired and actually serve jail time. Now, that hasn't really happened. You know what I mean? Many officers are charged with something, but they're not convicted. They're not sent to jail. We saw how different things play out. And then they put them on administrative leave, which is a paid vacation pretty much for a while. And they're off somewhere with their family on the beach somewhere while everything kind of dies down, and they're brought right back in like nothing ever happened. So that's why the people are upset. They're like, this can't keep happening over and over again. And you see all the people looking at it personally. They're like, well, that could have been my son. You know what I mean? And they're looking at it. They're looking at the different facts and the things that happened and the different things that are coming alive to say, okay, he might have been walking in the middle of the street, and that's what might would have been what he did wrong for the police officer to come up with him. It's like, well, how does it go from him walking in the middle of the street or jaywalking to him being shot 6 times?
right, and I think that's the question that has to be answered in that case. And it's going to be answered. I'm not, I think that it's the thing to me though. I guess my point on that is that if you look at Jordan Davis, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and all the other people that have been killed since Mike Brown died,
Mhm.
in some of those cases there's been a lot of outrage, a lot of activity, a lot of chatter, a lot of anger. But where has that flipped and translated into actual action, into policy? You mentioned the sign where the person said "Justice for fill in the blank." So that pretty much says that is that mean that we're going to be confining ourselves to this perpetual purgatory of repeating the same thing over and over again? A week later, there's another case. Somebody gets killed by the police. We're protesting. We get mad, and then nothing changes. No new laws. We're not pushing for anything substantive that's going to lead to real policy change. And I think that's where we have to shift our strategy a little bit and really get behind things that are going to make a difference. Even with an economic boycott, after Trayvon died and the protests ended, there were people that called for an economic boycott of Florida, and people weren't interested in that because it was almost like the party's over now. I'm going to go home. And people have to
Yeah,
understand this is a sustained
I don't
thing.
think that's quite fair to say because there was also people who said, okay, this is okay to do it this way. What is another way that we can do it? And you have the Dream Defenders who went down there, and there's all young people, not any older people, all young people that went down there, camped in front of the governor's home, and protested in front of there. And they said they're going to push for different stand your ground laws and things like that. So people were involved. I don't paint the picture that everybody just said, okay, it's over, and then they all went home. I don't think that's quite what what happened, but what enough doesn't happen because, like you said, it's the same thing over and over again. That's been happening for decades. This isn't a new problem. This has been happening since the 60s, the 50s, the 40s of issues with the police. You know what I mean? So something has to give, and we have to have a definite plan in place for when it happens again. Because it's not like we're thinking that whatever happens from this Mike Brown situation, that's going to be the end of it. You know what I mean? I mean, I read a report that said like 5 or 6 different young black men have been killed since Mike Brown by the police, since Mike Brown 2 weeks ago. So this is an ongoing issue and a problem that we have, and we have to come up with some solutions, not just the conversations. Conversations, okay, we've had conversations before. And like you said, and I'm agreeing with you, we need to come up with some actual solutions, whether they need to have some kind of different people in the police force. When I was growing up, we had something called the Black Cops Coalition. And they were a group of about 25, 30 different policemen, all that lived in our community, went to our churches, knew our parents, and they treated us completely different. Now, when you have white cops that don't live in the community, you know what I mean, they're looking at you like you're specifically the enemy. And it's not just white cops. I just mentioned, cops that don't live in the community and don't know the people. There's no relationship. So they're looking at you like a soldier is looking at when he's coming onto war, and he's looking at you as just the enemy. And that's the issue, is that too many police right now. Do we really need a militarized police force the way that we've seen, with tanks and more artillery than they've had in Iraq right now? I mean, the entire thing is ridiculous. So you're right. We have to push for a lot of different changes. And some of the changes come from the top. So some of the changes come locally. So you're right. There's a whole list of ways that we have to keep pushing. But I'm tired of just hearing conversations about race on CNN tonight with Don Lemon. You know what I mean? Every time something happens, I don't want to hear that no more.
Well, I agree with you. I'm not a big Don Lemon fan. I'll say that, but I'm not gonna go into that. But I am an Etan Thomas fan. So when they replace Don Lemon with Etan Thomas, I will give you my vote, brother. Thank you, man, for sharing all your wisdom. It was great talking to you as usual.
Always great talking to you, and thanks for all that you're doing. Sometimes we have difference of opinions, and I always say we could disagree without being disagreeable, like President Obama always says.
And I always say Etan's wrong and I'm right, but I'm messing with you, man. Well, everybody, this is Etan Thomas. He happens to be a former NBA player. He had a great career in the league, but that's one of the in my opinion, one of the just one of many things that he's accomplished in his life. He's also the author of the book Fatherhood, The Ultimate Challenge, and he has gone around the country promoting fatherhood, which most of you, I hope, understand the importance of this in our community. He's also the host of The Collision, where sports and politics collide. Is that the right?
Right, with Dave Zirin. I have a co-host as well, not me by myself, but with Dave Zirin.
With the great Dave Zirin.
The great Dave Zirin.
Everybody knows Dave. Dave is amazing in sports, and you just so I can make sure I get this right. Where is your show? Where does it air?
It's in DC, 89.3 WPFW. Every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
All right, Thursday 10 o'clock. Say it again.
WPFW.
WPFW. You can also stream it online, right?
Right. At www.wpfwfm.org.
There you go. All right. Well, everybody, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.